Welcome to Moving Mom and Downsizing Dad, the podcast that prepares you for one of life's toughest yet inevitable moments, stepping in when your parents need you most. Hosted by Chris Spade, a senior real estate specialist with Keller Williams Realty. We'll dive deep into more than just moving. We're talking smart financial planning, making tough decisions with confidence, and strategies to avoid being caught in crisis mode. Join us for real stories, expert insights, and actionable steps to stay ahead of the curve. Now, here's your host, Chris Spade.
And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Moving Mom and Downsizing Dad, the podcast where we help San Diego Gen Xers navigate our lives and our aging parents. I'm your host, Chris Spade with Keller Williams Realty right here in San Diego. And today, this is going to be a good episode. We are diving into mental health for caregivers. Now, caregiving for an aging parent or a loved one is one of the most selfless and challenging roles anyone can take on. In fact, it's a journey filled with love, responsibility, and let's face it, and let's be honest, some serious mental ups and downs. Now, as caregivers, we often focus so much on the needs of others and we forget about our own well-being. But today, we are diving into mental health and the emotional side of caregiving because your health matters too. So joining me today is Marcie Hanna, a licensed clinical social worker with over 25 years experience helping individuals navigate anxiety, depression, and the emotional complexities of caregiving. Now, Marcie specializes in supporting those who are caregiving for aging parents, helping them recognize stress, manage guilt, and set boundaries while still showing up with love and compassion. And today she's here to help us understand how to care for ourselves while caring for others without burning out in the process. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed, exhausted, or just unsure how to balance it all, this episode's for you. Marcie, welcome to Moving Mom and Downsizing Dad.
Thank you, Chris. I tell you, it's really nice to be here and to see you. I've just always enjoyed collaborating with you and doing all kinds of stuff. So thanks for inviting me.
I am so grateful that you're here because I talked to you a little bit about my story, which is, what I went over in our first episode with all the listeners. But I'm just like super, super happy to kind of dive into this because I've heard this from several people about, their bandwidth is just tight, and it's stretched like a rubber band and they don't want to snap. And so, I'm just really looking forward to getting into this.
That's so true. And I appreciate you jumping in to help somebody who needed it.
Yeah.
So good job.
Yeah. And she and I had a conversation the other day, so I was very excited. Everything is going well. So let's talk about recognizing caregiver stress and burnout. What are the early signs of stress and burnout in caregivers?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important to say that there's not too many of us that have the level of self-awareness in ourselves that would recognize when we're in the early stages, because as you probably experienced, it just went super fast, right? It's like all of a sudden you're in the throes.
Exactly.
And so you've kind of bypassed all those early warning signs and now you're into the other things. But if you did have a level of self-awareness, it would be things like your energy level has gone down. You're feeling fatigued all the time. Now your sleep is being affected. Either you're having too much sleep, not enough. You're eating too much, not enough, losing weight, gaining weight, all of those types of things. And then you neglect your own needs, of course. And you talked about that in the introduction. You do neglect your own needs. So those are the warning signs.
Well, let's talk for a second. How is it that we all have stress, right? All of us in our daily lives with work and paying bills and even going to the grocery store can be stressful for some people. So how can caregivers differentiate between normal stress and more serious mental health concerns?
Yeah, well, good question, because normal stress, as you just mentioned, in times when it's challenging is normal, right? This is normal. And so you want to normalize that a little bit, but where it really starts impacting us was when things become more serious, and that might be anxiety, depression, and it's kind of paralyzed you to some degree. It's kind of, you're just not able to function like you once did. And so that's really when looking at going to your primary care physician is always the first line of defense, really, because what we try to do is rule out anything medical first, like, are there any medical causes for this? And it could be, dehydration, it could be imbalances with hormones, it could be a number of things. And then after you've kind of ruled that out, and the good thing is caregivers don't go to the doctor very often. So it's kind of good to get a physical in there. You go, oh yeah, a physical, that's great,
it's time
to do the physical. But then they're your quarterback, usually primary care physician. So then they can start referring out. And a lot of times they do have some good knowledge of antidepressants and anxiety medications and things like that. So that would be really what, I would recommend doing if it goes beyond what would be a normal sign of stress.
What practical strategies can caregivers employ to manage overwhelming emotions? Because like in my instance, it was just like I could feel my back getting tight and my shoulders hurting, and like what can we do? And there's always emotions that come into that, right? I had the stress of getting ready to go show houses when I was getting the call from the doctor, and I'm like I could just feel everything tense. What can one do?
Right. And so I guess really what I wanted to say too is just I wanted to use the term so that we're kind of on the same page. And so I'm going to refer to the person that you're caring for as your person, because a lot of times we're saying, well, your loved one or whatever. And a lot of times it's not a loved one. It's not even a liked one, or it's even like, I can't stand one.
Good
so
point.
We don't really know, if this is, what the relationship is. And so we just say your person, so a lot of times, if somebody doesn't get really a real break from their person, all caregiving situations are different. So yours, you're trying to work and you're out there doing things, and then all of a sudden you pick up your phone and you see on the display, and it kind of clenches your heart and all of types of things. And so it's really important to take regular breaks. And so if you are that person that is caring for your person at home, if you are the caregiver doing that, then if your person is taking a rest, then you take a rest as well. Because usually what people want to do is run around the house like their hair's on fire and, pick up the whole house, start the dinner, do all of this sort of thing, because now they have a break to get those things done. And so now, no, it's like cut yourself some slack and you have to take that break.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I can totally relate to that, because when there was downtime, it's like, got to clean the house, got to do this, got to do, and it's just like, go, go, go. So yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah. And, and so it's that also is to really set some realistic expectations of yourself. You really cannot do everything all at once. It's like, can you really show a house and take this phone call all at the same time, or run to the hospital? And so it's kind of like having, before the crisis or before whatever it is that's going to happen, that the other shoe's going to drop, is kind of have some line of defenses in place already, things that you've already thought of. Because when you're in the heat of the moment, when the call's coming in and you're ready to show a house, you can't think of what to do. I mean, how can you? Your heart's clenching. If you had somebody that you're going to call and say, hey, they're calling from the hospital, can you take over for this one or whatever?
Yeah. Well, on that same note, like, how does a caregiver get into a routine without having that feeling of guilt?
Yes,
when we're trying to do all these things? Because it's like, I mean, I feel this overwhelming amount of guilt when something like that happens. How do you not feel guilty?
I mean, you do feel guilty. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't you? Because you're a caring person and all of those things, it's natural to feel guilty. And so once we understand that should our ship go down, right? Should we not be doing anything for ourselves to kind of monitor this and to give ourselves a little bit of self-care, then our ship will go down. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people don't understand that concept and how getting help and not feeling guilty getting help they understand it's essential. And usually what
Right.
happens, Chris, is their own health gets impacted, right? So
Right.
all of a sudden they're doing, something's going on. They've either fallen, themselves because they're preoccupied with the whole deal of caregiving, or their immune system is compromised because they're not taking care of themselves. Now they're sick. Then they're going, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with my person?
Mm-hmm.
If I wipe out, what is going to happen? Then all of a sudden it becomes real and you don't feel as guilty any longer. You understand that it's essential to the whole thing, to the whole picture, the person, yourself, their family, anybody that's involved with this person. It's essential that you take care of yourself.
I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah.
So, what resources are available for caregivers who are seeking sort of mental health support? What does that look like?
Well, luckily here in San Diego, there's a lot. There's a lot more than most. Well, I shouldn't say that because I don't know every place in the whole country, of course. But in San Diego, we have a lot of good resources here. And if you just start at somewhere like the County of San Diego Aging and Independence Services, they have a call center, which is kind of the gateway to all older adult services. This is assuming you're caregiving for somebody who's older.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a great place to start. 211, which is also another gateway. They vet their organizations and providers and all of those things. And the people who answer are clinicians. I mean, people that
Okay.
offer advice as well and listen with an active listening type of ear.
Mm-hmm.
And then places like Alzheimer's San Diego, again, there's clinicians answering those phones. Jewish Family Services, those are great resources.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about talking to your family and friends. How can a caregiver effectively communicate their needs to family members and their friends that they need help because it's so hard for some people to reach out?
Yes, that's the big issue, right?
Yeah. And
That's
that's where you get the tightening in your back and you just walk around, looking all wonky.
I know, because that's a lot of what therapy. I mean, that this is some of the number one. You're hitting on the number one topics. How do I do this? And I'll even role play sometimes with caregivers. I'll say, okay, I'm the family member. What are we going to say? I'll be the family member. So it takes practice. In other words, it takes practice. When this is not something you naturally do, it takes practice. So whenever there's something that you don't naturally do, you start in small steps, right? And so when you're successful with these small steps, then it builds confidence. And some of the other things we might discuss today is the same type of approach, but once you've asked somebody, you start with the most friendliest of all, right? The ones that you think might say yes. And so you start
because
with
we've all got those people. We've all got nice people in our lives.
Right. And so then you have to be specific because there's everybody we know that are those nice people. They'll say, hey, you know what? Give me a call whenever you need it. I'm here. All of that. That's what nice people say. But they need direction. They're not going to be a mind reader and say, you know what, Chris, I just know today is the day that Chris is going to call me.
Explode or implode. Right?
They just don't know this.
Yeah.
So you have to be very specific and just say, look, I am overwhelmed. You use those I messages. I am completely overwhelmed. And then you can't be vague about it.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, hey, look, we haven't eaten. We don't have any groceries in the house.
I was just going to say it could be
Yeah.
as something as simple as, hey, I've ordered the groceries at Vaughn's. Can you just drive up and pick them up?
Yes,
I mean, it can be something as simple as that. So you don't have to go
absolutely.
out and make that extra trip to sit in the parking lot at the
Yes,
grocery, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. Because a lot of times, our person needs our supervision 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you cannot leave them, to go to Vaughn's and sit in that, little place where they come and deliver the groceries to your car. Or you can bring your person with you, that
Yeah.
you're caring for. But it's hard sometimes to get them in the car. Maybe they're
Yeah.
sleeping a lot. Who knows
Yeah.
what's happening at the house? And so yes, you have to be very specific.
Yeah. So, how can caregivers maintain a healthy balance between their caregiving duties and personal lives? Since we just kind of like twisted into that topic, like,
I know. And that is hard because what is balance when you've got this going on? What does it even look like? And a lot of times when you're telling people they've got to practice self-care, they just have to, they look at you like you're from outer space, honestly. They're going like, what does that even mean?
yeah,
How can I do it? I can't leave my person. How do you even suggest that I do this? And so basically then you're going, okay, let's get this down to something that's kind of manageable because it really does take a village. It really does. And so it's kind of like, well, you have to create some kind of structure to your day. That's
hmm
what balance is all about, right? And it's kind of like seizing it, just taking control in a good way and saying, hey, look, this is my day. I've got to have some structure built
hmm
in.
So,
And
time blocking a
yeah,
calendar.
right, time blocking, saying, okay, this is like I was mentioning before, when my person takes a rest, this is when I put in that, what would it be, like a guided imagery, I think is really a good thing because you don't know what you're doing, right? It's like,
hmm
how do I even do that? It's like there's a million of them
hmm
on YouTube and things like that. You just, for any occasion, right?
hmm
It's like guided imagery for stress reduction. I'm a caregiver, whatever it is, and you listen to it. But the nice thing about this is structure is really important to the person you're caring for too. They respond to structure as well. Everyone needs structure because then it feels like things are out of control, right? It's just out of control. And when you build in structure, it starts creating the balance. You have to have something, to start it off. There has to be that first step, and so usually that's a good one. And then that's when you start bringing in the family support. That's when you start practicing. It takes practice, as we were talking about. Starting with the friendly ones, and then kind of branching out and building your support. You have to kind of build it.
Yeah.
And this is foreign to us, right? It's just foreign to really.
Well,
Um,
because so many people are just thrust into this,
yes.
but just so quickly because of lack of preparation. And, we just don't, we see our person as someone who's invincible or,
Yeah.
too cranky to die or something. I used to tell my grandma, I'm like, God's not ready for you yet. You're too cranky, right? And she kept saying, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. And I'm like, well, you got to mellow out a little bit, right? So, and finally she got there. but yeah, so yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah,
um
it sure is.
well, what advice do you have for caregivers who struggle to set boundaries, because
Yeah,
we need them, right?
it's so true. Yeah, we do. We have to set boundaries. And this again is something that maybe we've never done in our entire lives, set boundaries. And maybe we never realized that we have the right to manage our own personal space, whether it's emotional space, physical space,
Hmm.
whatever it is, that we have the right to do that somehow.
Yeah.
So say you're busy showing a house, and then you get that phone call, and the next thing you know, somebody says, hey, look, can you do an open house for me this weekend? And you're like, uh, what? And so you're kind of like at
Yeah.
first taken aback, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Taken aback by this, and caregivers are too, because your propensity is to say yes if you don't
Yes.
have good boundaries, right? And
Right.
somewhere along the way, it's like you can't say, well, no, I'm already doing 20 things, and now oh yes, now it's 21.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that's, you just can't do that.
And I don't have that many arms. I'm not an octopus. I don't revolve around.
No, so you do start out small. This takes practice. I know it sounds funny, but you do have to practice doing boundaries. And I love one client I had not that long ago. Well, maybe a couple of years. And so we were discussing this not long ago, saying, look at where you started. You just didn't even know if you could do this. And now you're one of the best boundary setters in town.
Yeah.
And it's just really good. And you start out very small. And then you say, first thing was, well, nope, it doesn't look like I'll be able to do that. No, that's not something I'm able to do.
Yeah. Well,
just with a nice, tone, and that's it.
the message so far I'm getting from our conversation is practice. Like, this stuff takes practice.
It does, because were you born and knowing all these things about caregiving? All of a sudden, here I am, I'm born, and I know someday when I'm going to be caring for someone, I have all the skills and the knowledge and all of that, and I'm born with it.
Yeah.
You have to just practice.
It's
right?
practice. It's probably, well, none of us came out learning how to walk, right? We all crawled before we walked.
Right.
So
you start small. You have to start small, because if you don't, you get overwhelmed very quickly. And that's the last thing. Caregivers are already overwhelmed. You don't need to start telling them to do things that are going to overwhelm them further.
Yeah.
So once you see that success with the small thing, right? Oh, I just said no. Hey, that worked really well. They just said, well, no problem. No problem.
You could almost turn it into a game, I guess, right?
Yes.
just to see how far you can push the boundary.
Yeah. And so they just said, no problem. That's great. And that's a confidence builder. So the next time, and darn well you can't do it, then you're just going to say, no, it's really something I'm not able to do right now.
Yeah. Well, that's
Or
good.
whatever it is, whatever your language is that you're comfortable using.
Yeah. No, I like that. That I like. So let's talk about managing guilt and resentment a little bit. Let's just kind of switch. So what steps can caregivers take to address feelings of guilt, resentment that might come up? Because maybe you've even set that boundary and you feel good about setting the boundary, but then you're off having your self-care moment, which you deserve, right?
Yes.
But then guilt kicks in.
Wow.
What does that look like?
Right. Well, it's normal. It's kind of like stress over challenging situations is normal. So guilt is normal, because these are caring people for the most part, right? Caregivers are caring people, and they're thinking, here I am out enjoying myself, and my person is at home, and their world is narrow now. They're not doing anything. And here I am out at some play or something. And so it's really good for them, right? This is how caregivers charge their batteries, so that they can come back home and be fresh for their person. This is how you do it. So it's not only you that's benefiting, but your person is also benefiting from you doing this. And so it's to normalize it. Number one, normalize it. And then if you start getting yourself all, just ruminating about the fact that you're enjoying yourself, you just kind of tell yourself, no, you've got to knock it off, that you don't beat yourself up over these types of things. And then you kind of refocus in a way. And then by saying, what I was just mentioning, that this is helping my person as well. And then you think about the positive parts, because you've already negatively beaten yourself up, all around the block practically.
Yeah.
So,
that's a good reframe to take it and just, be like, this may be how I feel in this, second, but there's a book I love reading called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and he talks about it's a great book on how to get your morning going and get into that zone, right? And one of the things he talks about is attitude is a choice, and this is really you get to think about your attitude as you're, being a caregiver, and you can, say, this is, like your outlook is, you can either say life happens to you or life happens for you. Right.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
it's just like getting caught in a traffic, getting caught behind a traffic accident. And you're like, oh, I'm going to be late. But something, or being stuck in traffic, right? Well, that may have prevented an accident from happening, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
it's just kind of like a reframe. You just got to keep reframing everything into a positive thing,
Yes.
like some
Yes.
things, something's protecting you from something greater, right?
Yes. Yes. And actually, when you can consistently do that in life in general, it's so much better. Especially, I mean, you're talking about on the freeways and things like that. And yes, those are major stressors getting to and from places. And I remember one of my colleagues said, because I think I had been cut off on the freeway on my way to the office. And I said, oh my gosh, I mean, I just narrowly escaped it. And they said, they probably were on their way to their hospital because their mom is in there or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, what? And my first thing was, are you joking me? They're on their way to the hospital. So then I just thought, hold on a second, get your
Mm-hmm.
clinical brain on. And was perfect.
Yeah.
If you can say, you know what, that poor person,
Mm-hmm.
they're doing whatever and you just give them this humanness and just empathy.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you've switched it around so fast, your head almost spins,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's like a great way to reframe. Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
l- let me ask you. So, um, and this is not something we talked about, but it just popped into my head. When do you know, as a caregiver, that it might be time to bring in some professional help? Like, is there a point where you're just like, I need help now? What is that
Yeah.
switch?
Yeah, this is interesting because for the most part, when you and I were talking about this, it does have something to do with evolving challenges.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What that caregivers have in their role.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it kind of it blends into that nicely because again, it's that level of self-awareness that you don't always have
Mm-hmm.
when you realize it's gotten too far, more
Yeah.
than what you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
And so maybe what happens is that it could be just someone from the outside, a friend that comes in to visit you and just goes, oh my gosh, and they're a loving friend and they're going to tell it to you straight,
Mm-hmm.
just, you know what, this has gotten too much. But when people really start understanding that they've gone beyond what they're capable of doing, is there's usually, what I always try to instruct them is that you make those decisions for safety reasons, number one.
Good point.
So safety, when you start realizing that person's safety is being compromised, and it could be, say, the person has dementia and they're a wanderer, and you
Mm,
realize you cannot contain their safety in your four walls any longer. They're,
mhm.
they're getting out. And that's like the last thing you want to hear is
Yep.
that your person's gotten out.
Yep.
And so that's when either you need to have the help in the home or even potentially the hardest thing for people to explore is having somebody move to somewhere that's secure.
Yep.
So those are safety. It could be wandering. It could be that now their needs have honestly just gone beyond your capacity to provide care for. I mean,
Mhm.
it becomes a skilled need where you really need to have a skill. You need to be a nurse, or you need to have some other set of skills that really would keep them safe. Because, say, for instance, somebody now is bedbound and you don't have the personal strength to
Lift him.
reposition them,
Yeah.
because honestly, people have to be repositioned every 2 hours or their skin starts breaking down.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it could be a lot of things, and it's hard to recognize between some of the earlier things where you might just be supervising and all of those types of things in the very beginning and making sure they're safe, and it's easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's some steps in between, which could be, like once the train has left the station,
Right.
there's the early stops, right? And then there's a bunch in between, and then you're getting towards your destination. And so it's those in between stops where you probably could have at one of those stops, made a decision like that. But usually it's not until the later stops when you just realize it's gone too far.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple falls. Could be really anything,
Yep.
but it would have been better somewhere in the middle. And so you have to try to help people not have that guilt, right? Why didn't I recognize it? Well, who really does? A clinician, I would say, even because now that I'm older, I had parents that needed support. My dad had dementia. My mom had physical needs. And so it's hard when you're involved in it so deeply to recognize some of those things.
Right.
So this is where giving people kind of permission to make those mistakes and get rid of the shoulds and all of those things. They're not even really mistakes, honestly. They're just, don't have that awareness. It's too overwhelming.
Yeah.
It really is. And so I know it's a long answer. It goes all around it, but there's so much. This is a complicated issue.
Yeah.
There's so many things, components to this that, one caregiver, a caregiver isn't a caregiver. They, have so many different things that they bring to the table with their own needs, and then the person they're caring for, of course.
Yeah. Quickly, I want to circle back for 1 second. So if somebody needed to get some professional assistance from someone like yourself, could they call 211 and get referrals to like a therapist they could talk to?
Yeah, they could do that. And then specific to whatever their person needs, whatever their diagnosis might be.
Mm-hmm.
Say it's a cognitive issue.
Okay.
Then calling a place that provides support to people that have cognitive issues like Alzheimer's San Diego, because they work not only with people who have Alzheimer's disease, but other diagnoses as well. Anything that there's so many different styles of dementia, so it could be anything. So you would probably contact them because they would have a therapist that they have vetted that understands dementia. And because you really need a caregiver, you need to support the therapist that is supporting that caregiver really needs to know dementia and understand what's going on. And likewise, it could be, a physical need, maybe ALS or something like that. And so organizations that serve people who have ALS would have their own list of therapists that they know would be able to support their people well.
Good.
Yeah.
Good advice. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think is important that we should know?
Oh gosh, yeah. I think that that when you probably see somebody in your life, that needs some kind of support, it's hard to step in, sometimes, and to really tell them, that you're concerned for them or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say, don't hesitate, and just even saying, look, I'm probably saying this the wrong way. I don't know how to say it. All I can tell you is I'm really worried, because when you can go from those early stages where you're having all those symptoms we talked about, sleeplessness, fatigue, all of that. But then you start getting into depression, and then things start looking really hopeless.
That's not good.
Really hopeless. And so we know when people get in a hopeless situation that they're vulnerable to making permanent decisions for something that could be temporary if they're getting the right level of support. And so So we really don't want that to happen. And we have had in organizations I've worked in where caregivers have taken their lives, because they just didn't feel they had any other choice. And and this is when all hands are on deck and people are really providing support. So it's like, don't worry about how you say it, what words you use. They're going to know your heart and just say, I'm just speaking from my heart, and just know that I want to help you try to find somebody you can talk to.
That's excellent advice.
Yeah.
Marcie, I am so grateful that you came on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. This has been great.
You're so welcome, Chris. I'm just delighted that you've decided to do this. It's going to help a lot of people for all the topics you were telling me about.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. I'm very excited that you came on the show, and thank you again for helping the listeners and the viewers on YouTube, understand that you can feel guilt, but there are resources to help you, and that's what's important.
Right. Absolutely.
There's help for the help, right?
Yes. That's right.
All right. Thank you, Marcie, and thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I am going to have everything down in the show notes below, and I'm super grateful for you all listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.